Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm going to create a Love You Valentine card. Now, I wanted to use the Stacked Hearts die set, but I wanted to create some distressed background first. I have some Distress Mixed Media Heavy Stock in white. Now, it doesn't necessarily love the moisture, but it actually does okay. Some of these packages, when you get them, I had one that did amazing with moisture, but I had one that did horrible with moisture. So when you get the white mixed media heavy stock, just know it may be okay with wet techniques and it may not be. Tim Holtz has even said in one of his lives that it just depends on the batch you get it from. So I am just creating a distressed background here in order to cut those hearts out of later. I have 4 different distress ink pads here that I'm using. I'm using Spun Sugar, Kitsch Flamingo, Picked Raspberry, and Aged Mahogany. I'm not using a ton of the Aged Mahogany, but I just wanted this background to be dark in a few different areas. I don't tend to do a ton of Valentine's cards because we don't really do Valentine's in our house. Like we do like a little bit of candy and maybe we'll make a heart pizza or something, but we just don't tend to do a whole lot. So I don't go over the top or do a lot, but I do enjoy creating a couple cards here and there. So this one here, I'm going to use those stacked heart dies, but I'm also going to use the bold text die, and that's where I'm going to get the Love You words from. I don't have a lot of Valentine's die, or not Valentine's, alphabet die sets, which I really should change, but I have what I need to get by, so this is going to work. So for the distressed background, I smushed my ink pads. I have my surface media mat here. It's a great surface to work on for these backgrounds because the ink creates little water droplets on them, and you can create a lot of texture in this background. Typically when I'm doing these backgrounds, I dip it about 3 or 4 times. This particular one, I just kept going because I liked what was happening. I liked all the texture, but you can stop anytime you want. If you like what the background is looking like, you can stop. You can also decide to smush more ink pad on your background and do even more layers. It's entirely up to you. What I tend to do is I will dry my piece till it's probably about 80-90% dry. It doesn't need to be 100% dry, but you want to make sure there's no pools of water, because if there's any areas that are pools of water, if you dip it in again, chances are you're just going to blend those 2 colors together. You're not really going to get the texture and the layers. So you do want to make sure to dry it in between dips. You could let it air dry. This heat it tool just speeds up the process. A blow dryer likely might work. However, this heat it tool emits heat and it dries things as they are, and a blow dryer would blow the air and probably blow the moisture or whatever to different areas. So just be prepared that while this looks like a hair dryer, it's not. It just emits heat, but it's a lot more gentle than an embossing tool. So you're going to keep doing this on your background until you like the way it looks. This technique can be done with any color you want. You don't have to just do it with these colors. I've made countless backgrounds, and the sky's the limit when it comes to color choices. When you're starting out, I like to choose colors that are similar to each other, or colors that are close to each other on the color wheel. If you go too many opposites, you could get some brown and some mud, which is fine if that's what you're going for. But if you're not super comfortable or familiar with colors or the color wheel, choose ones that are close to each other on the color wheel just to be a little bit safer. So I wanted to add a little bit of sparkle to this background. So what I'm using is some of the Distress mica stains, the seasonal ones. This first one here, I'm using Cocktail Party, and it's from the Christmas number 4 set. You'll notice every single time I use these, and I'm just using them to splatter some spots on the background, I clean off my surface mat. I found that these sitting on the mat tend to stain them, especially when I was heavy with things over the fall. I got a lot of staining on my mat, and this mat, it will stain, but in order to prevent that, I'm just wiping it off often so that I don't have them drying on there, to try to prevent some of the staining, or at least make it take a lot longer for it to stain. The second color I'm using here is Winterberry, and it's from the Christmas number 2 set. Now these are seasonal. I don't know at the time of filming this if they are still in stock or if they have gone for the season. Check around if none of the links that I have in the description work. check around, because often some of these places you'll find them throughout the year. It just depends on how much they've ordered and how well they've sold or how quickly they've sold. I have found them in different places throughout the year, but it's a great way to add just a touch of shimmer to your background. If you don't have any of these and don't want to get any of these, and this particular one here is Frozen Fog, it's more of a gray, and it's from the Christmas number 5 set. What you can do if you don't have these and don't want them is, when you're doing your distressed background, you can also add a little bit of Perfect Pearls. Perfect Pearls are a mica shimmer that have a binding agent in them that's activated by water. So when you spray those inks with water and are doing your distressed background, that binding agent is already activated, and it will add some shimmer to your background. It'll look different than these splattered marks that I'm doing here, but it will still be a great way to add some shimmer to your background. So I encourage you to try it. If you have those, just play around and see which one you like better. So because I wanted to do a matte on this card and I wanted it to match, I'm taking that Frozen Fog spray and I'm spraying a piece of cardstock in order to create my matte, and it's going to blend in perfectly with those Frozen Fog splatters that I have on my background here. I let that dry completely, and then I'm going to take my Love You die cut, and I'm going to die cut out of that Frozen Fog sprayed background there. The center of it is going to be completely covered when I create my card, so I might as well utilize it and cut my letters out of it. So I'm going to tuck those over to the side and pull them out of the die in just a moment. And then my pink background, I'm taking a bunch of different sizes from the Stacked Hearts dies. Now, if you've never seen these stacked die sets, they come in a few different shapes, and there are 5 sets of each size of the shape, and I think there's 4 different sizes of the hearts. There might be 5 different sizes of the hearts right off the top of my head. I don't have the package with me, but you can cut a bunch of the same sized hearts with it really quickly and really easily. Now, originally my plan was to use hearts within hearts and swap them for the O's in the love and the U. In the end, I did not do that because you couldn't see those hearts over top of the background that I was creating. So I end up using the letters anyways. But if you wanted to swap them out for letters for whatever you're creating, if your background isn't as busy as the one that I'm going to create, this is a great alternative, a great way to add a heart to your background or be a little bit subtle. I've seen Christmas ones where they've put wreaths instead of O's, something just a little bit different, a little bit fun. Like I said, in the end, I don't do it because they kind of get hidden with my background. Now, after I cut all of these distressed ones, I thought, you know what, they're not going to pop off of each other, so I need to cut some with scraps as well. So I took some of my Cardstock Scraps that matched the colors that I had in that background there, and I'm just going to die cut some more hearts out of those. I don't need a ton of them, but I do want a variety of different pinks here. Easy enough to just cut some out of Cardstock Scraps. Great way to use them, and a great way to add a little bit of variety to the background as well. Once I have all of those hearts cut, I can tuck them to the side and start layering my pieces to my card. So I have that silver piece there that I've cut out the Love You, and I'm going to add a pink mat to that. And then I'm going to put a white mat on top of that. I want to have a white background for my hearts to go on, but I want to put the mats on the card base first. Now, when I started this, I put my Love You here and I was going to tuck some hearts behind it, but I have a quicker and simpler and easier way to do this. So this is how I originally thought I was going to do the words here, and it probably still would have worked if I did those heart O's out of the silver. But in order to see things, if you put your words on top of an acrylic block and then create your background and occasionally put your words on top of it, you can really see how everything is going to come together, and it saves taking those letters and having to move them each and every single time. It can be a pain to have to move each one of them to be able to see if what's coming together is what you like. So this is a quick and easy way to do it. And you can quickly put those letters on top of it. They don't have to be perfectly spaced, but you get an idea of how things are going to look. So what I wanted to do for this background is just have a bunch of hearts of different sizes layered on top of each other, behind each other, for those words to for a background for those words. I'm using the Barely Art glue. It's a liquid glue here. It does start to catch or start to hold fairly quickly, but it will allow me to tuck and move things around a little bit as I need it. It'll also be perfect if I want to tuck something behind something else, because while it will hold to the paper, it will be easy to lift up just temporarily to tuck something behind it. And you can see how I regularly go back to those letters, putting them on top just to see where I need to add a little bit more hearts, where I want some of the darker or some of the solid colored ones. It's just a good reference and an easy way to do it. Now this card is done with hearts, but it would work with any shape as well. I think this would be a cool one to do with circles or bubbles or whatever, and then have an appropriate sentiment to go with that on top of it. Now the one thing to note, because I am layering so many layers on top of here, it does get to be a little bit it's not even on the top. So the center has more layers than the outer edges. So when I'm putting my acrylic block on there, it's not necessarily holding all four, like the outer edges down, especially when I go to glue that onto the front of my card. So while I typically will hold it down with an acrylic block while I am working on something else, for this particular one, I did off screen hold that layer or the outside parts of the layers down, just so that those pieces would have good contact with the paper underneath. Sometimes when you're working with liquid glue especially, you need to give it a few minutes for it to hold on to the layers underneath it, and this was no exception. So after I'd held onto it and while those pieces were drying, I die cut a couple extra pieces of my sentiment in some cardstock scraps. I wanted them to pop off the hearts a little bit more. They weren't quite as dimensional as I wanted them to be, and they didn't pop off quite as much as I wanted them to when I first laid them down. So by putting those cardstock scraps behind there, it makes it really easy just to give them a little bit more dimension. If you happen to have like thickers or an alphabet sticker that you can get that has a lot of dimension, those will work here as well. They just may or may not work well or coordinate as well with the sprays that we had on the background there. And by using the sprays on that cardstock, I know it's going to match perfectly. So here I'm gluing this heart piece on my mat, and here's where off screen I actually went and I held it down for a few minutes just to make sure that it had some good contact. Now, the lovely Jennifer McGuire had this brilliant tip to use the outline of your die cut to make sure that you have your letters evenly spaced. Now, if you wanted to space them differently, this tip will not work for you. But if you want, or you like the way they're spaced when you die cut them, this is such a quick and easy way to have those letters spaced perfectly and not have to do it yourself. And this piece typically is something that you're going to toss out anyways, so why not give it a second use before tossing it out? And this is after I've layered those letters together, so they are dimensional. So when you pull this piece off of here, you do want to be very careful. You want to make sure that your letters, or I made sure that my letters had grabbed a little bit but weren't necessarily stuck on completely. I could have waited a little bit longer, so you'll see me pushing the letters down. But it's a great way to get completely even spacing and not have to worry about your letters being a little bit wonky. Now, once I had that all done and I was waiting for them to dry, I had a few extra hearts here, and I wanted to take them and add them on my background, but outside of my white mat. I thought it just looked a little bit more interesting having a couple hearts that were off of there. And again, another way to use up the extra hearts that I already had die cut. Might as well use as many as possible. And I thought it looked like a really cute background. I really loved the way it looked. To give it a little bit of extra different texture, I'm taking some glossy accents and adding them to the letters. I have a really fine tip put on my Glossy Accents bottle so I can make sure to be as precise as possible. The one thing, if you've never used Glossy Accents before, if you happen to get any bubbles, the easiest time to get it out, or the only time to get them out, is when it is still liquid like this. You can just use a pin or a thumbtack and just poke it and pop the bubble. Once it's dry, you can't get that out, but it adds a different texture and a nice shine to those letters. Gives them a little bit, makes them pop a little bit more. So here is the finished card. I absolutely love that little heart background on there. And you can use any color combinations you want for those hearts back there. I use more traditional Valentine's colors, but anything will work. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. I hope you have a fantastic day.